Well, it's great to see you all. I thought I'd come and talk about how efficient railroads are, but I think Obi's done that already, so I can skip over that chapter. But I do want to say, any time that there's an organization that's called the Blue-Green Alliance, it's something I want to be involved in. I think it's just a tremendous analogy of blue for workers and jobs and our economy, and green for our stewardship of the environment. And for so long, so many have said that blue and green are at war. So we now know that they're not at war and that they're working together to make both our economy and our planet a better place. So this is a pretty good thing. And the goals of having a more robust economy, of strengthening national security, and being better stewards of the planet are all tied in to the conversation, the dialogue, and the debate that we are having here in Washington, D.C. I wanted to address a few pieces of that dialogue regarding vehicles, buildings, the generation of renewable energy, and manufacturing, and how those tie together. Now, I like to emphasize the role of vehicles. Vehicles utilize about 40% of the energy in our economy, and as I'll get to in a minute, buildings another 40%. But it disturbs me that we spend $1 billion a day on foreign oil. Now, 2 years ago when I was campaigning and oil prices spiked high, that was $2 billion a day. $1 billion is better than $2 billion. But we thoroughly expect the price of oil to go back up again. And this is a tremendous part of our trade deficit. And every single time that dollars go overseas, those are dollars that are escaping our economy and that do not reverberate through wages and restaurants and grocery stores and every other part of our economy to make families stronger. In addition, most of those dollars go to countries that do not share our core national interests. They end up in the hands of Chavez in Venezuela and various folks in the Middle East. That is not the place that we should be sending our dollars. So national security is tied together. And indeed, I'll come to wind in a little while, but it was a meeting with the Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on an issue, and regarding the interaction between Doppler radars and wind turbines. And the first thing he said to me is, I know, before you say it, I know that wind turbines contribute to our national security. So that message is certainly getting through even into the military leadership. So 2010 represents a real year of the electric vehicle. Now out in the parking lot, we have a 1939 UPS all-electric delivery vehicle. I understand it would go 8 miles. Well, not sure what kind of route you could go on those 8 miles. But it represented certainly the fact that electricity has been with us for a long time. There were a lot of electric cars before there were virtually any oil-powered or gasoline-powered cars. And electricity is coming back into its own. It won't be that long before we'll be able to choose between the Tesla sedan, the Nissan Leaf, and the Chevy Volt, and a bunch of other electric vehicles. If we could go the first 40 miles in our passenger vehicles on electricity on any given day, we'd be reducing 70% of the carbon dioxide produced by our passenger cars. That's a pretty significant impact. And indeed, electric vehicles bring together the magic of regenerative braking. Well, if you can capture the energy every time a heavy vehicle comes to a stop, you have recaptured a tremendous amount of energy that's currently lost. And then there's the fact that electricity generation is more efficient than burning fuel directly in cars. Even if you were to take that same fuel and burn it in a power plant and distribute it on the grid, you still come out ahead of burning it separately in individual cars. And of course, electric vehicles then present the possibility and the potential to have that electricity generated in a non-carbon fashion. So those forces coming together mean that electrification of our cars and our delivery fleet is a very important part of the puzzle. I'm working with Senator Dorgan and Senator Alexander on a bill for the deployment of electric vehicles. This bill will create deployment communities to take and establish locations in the United States of different size, different shape, to really show that you can take and produce additional electric cars and additional infrastructure in a way that accelerates both. It is important to recognize that there's other elements of our transportation economy that I won't dwell on, because I know I'm going to start getting the nod if I hit my 10 minutes here. But I do want to observe, it's already been talked about rail. I believe that last year when the rail lobby was in my office, they had pins that didn't say 480. I think they said 457? 457. And so, of course, I did what I was supposed to do, which was say, and what's 457 for? And Obi has already told us, it is pretty remarkable if you think about it, that a gallon of diesel can take a ton of freight 457 miles. It's remarkable, and it does represent tremendous efficiencies that can be gained. We need to be looking at that. We need to be looking at high-speed passenger rail. We need to be continuing to redesign the form of our cities to produce options to using personal vehicles. Portland, Oregon has had a lot of folks come in. How many folks have ever visited Portland, Oregon? Wow, look at that. All right, go Oregon. Because it is really working on the form of the city. We have statewide land use planning with boundaries around our urban centers. This was a strategy set up almost 40 years ago now, and it really, as the communities have expanded to bump those boundaries, those urban growth boundaries, it's redefined the form of the city and meant we put far more investment in the urban core than we would have otherwise, and made the use of metro more feasible. And now we're putting down streetcars. And those streetcars represent a little bit of an alternative. They're more like a permanent bus in a way, and that economic development builds up around them because they are permanent, but they're far more efficient than burning fuel in a bus. And those streetcars that are now being produced in Oregon by Oregon Iron Works, and I believe that right here in D.C., I understand rail is being laid for streetcars, and any decision makers from D.C., please buy those streetcars in America, which means the only place you'll buy them is Portland, Oregon, because it's the only place they're being built right now in America. Well, let me turn now to buildings. Buildings also use about 40% of our energy. And there is huge potential to increase the energy efficiency of so many buildings built over such a long period of time, long before we had the insulation standards, the double-paned windows that we have today, and so on and so forth. This is why Homestar and Building Star are such important programs, and why, as you visit Capitol Hill, I'll certainly encourage you to please weigh in heavily on Homestar and Building Star. You know, former President Bill Clinton came to our caucus, and he came to talk about jobs in the economy, and he spent virtually his entire time talking about buildings. And the statistics he had were that there is no more cost-effective way to create jobs than invest in the energy efficiency of our buildings. And so the idea behind Homestar and Building Star, one focusing on residences, one on commercial buildings, is that folks would do a lot more energy conservation if they could overcome the upfront costs of those renovations. I think about my house back home, and I could use some additional double-pane windows, but the upfront cost has a bit of a sticker shock. But if I knew that I could pay for that with a low-cost loan that would be on my electric bill, and the savings would actually be as much as the cost of the loan payments, then there is no upfront cost. And I'm much more likely to adopt that strategy, and much more likely, therefore, jobs would be created around that.